Undead Unluck, Chapter 123. You guys like that? That's my new AI and machine learning driven VR experience. It turns a young black guy into a white woman right on camera. Crazy, isn't it? However, Chapter 123, you heard it. It's a very interesting one. Yoshifumi threw a lot of interesting information at us in this chapter, such as the birth of a young undead, Undead Unluck, Jules and her shortcomings in this past loop, along with how we could potentially, truly, have the key to getting this gigantic task done. So please, without further ado, Rimeru, let's get into it. So we learned last chapter that this card right here with Andy's head is actually an artifact. The artifact Remember. And this artifact has its functions outlined for us this chapter. This artifact rules over memories, and it has a binary function, an observe and a reverse function. Observe restores the memories and increases your allies, and seal actually seals memories and leaves you without allies. And each loop, you can only use one of these functions. So you can either reset everything or you can continue forward. And this was a point of, disagreement or differentiation between Jules and Victor. Originally, I was thinking that, maybe Victor actually sealed away his own memories. Victor, after experiencing all these tragedies year after year, and as we learned, a lot of years after years, potentially just got to a point where he just didn't want to deal with this anymore. Where he said that I'd rather just live on my life, die at the hands of God potentially, even though you can't really die, and just get over this whole continuous process of trying to fix everything. However, this actually isn't what occurred, and it's very interesting to see that Victor, very similar to just like Andy or Fuko, is truly just trying to save the one that he cared the most about. In this chapter, we get a flashback from Jules, and she is just sitting here, pounding down on the table, just bewildered. It just has this sort of anguish sensed over her, where she just doesn't understand what she's doing wrong, what they are lacking right now in terms of trying to get this gigantic task of defeating God done. And sensing this anguish that's really taken hold over the woman he loves, Victor actually reaches out and says, let's call it quits already. 99 loops, approximately 455.4 billion years. You've done all that you could. You must be satisfied now. Don't you think it's about time to just let it end? And we get a little bit of insight into where Victor's head was at whenever this inflection point in the history or the timeline of Undead was at right here. Victor just had finally reached this point where he's not like Jules. Jules had obviously gone through various loops, lived for thousands of years realistically. However, she was not like Victor. Victor stayed on the earth every single time that the earth was destroyed. He saw God's hand reach down and destroy everything come the time of Ragnarok. And he truly understood that this insurmountable task that's ahead of them might be just that, insurmountable. And he said that basically, if I love somebody this much and you're just going to continuously struggle and go through all these loops trying to accomplish this impossible task, I'd rather just let's leave it. Let bygones be bygones. Let the negators live on as negators in this next loop. Let them have the tragedies befall them and let them live on their life afterwards, because we have to do that for ourselves too. And if we can't do that for ourselves, then maybe I have to take hold of the reins and try to get this situation accomplished through other methods. But Jules pushes back. She says that all this work that we've put together would be meaningless if we just stopped at this point. That we'd have to continue to push forward, and that there actually might be something that we can use to leverage all this work that we've put in this loop. The artifact Remember. She says that if we can get our hands on this card, we will be able to go forward to the next loop with a sort of the game changer, to say, to ensure that they can get those allies, that they are already motivated, that they already understand everything, they understand how to use their abilities, they understand who they are, they understand the goals they're trying to accomplish, and you're just set up way better than you've been in any of the prior loops, maybe even having enough firing power to actually complete that task of defeating God. And Victor agrees. Victor says, all right, I'm with you, Jules, because Victor's always done that. He'll do anything for Jules, and seemingly, as I'll note later, has always been in tandem with Jules and what his vision of justice is. And although they always seemingly were in tandem, this actually was where they diverged paths. Victor wanting to use the artifact Remember for a different reason than Jules. Although Jules wanted to continue things, use this artifact to have everybody regain their memories, have everybody understand the task that they have at hand. Victor actually wanted to use it to reset everything. Like I mentioned, he just said that I don't want anybody to have to be fighting this gigantic task anymore. I don't want my woman to have to be suffering anymore. And if we can just reset everything, start at point blank zero, then shit, let's just do that. In this pivotal moment between Jules and Victor, this conversation about the artifact Remember actually leads to them continuing to search for it. And as they actually find where this artifact is, in this war-torn country, inside of a little church, we have a watershed moment within the lives of Jules. Before I go a little bit further into that moment, this is an interesting church. Seemingly is the exact same one that Spoil was found in during this loop. And I'm not 100% sure, it's just got that same exact statue, which Spoil actually birthed himself out of within that church, and it looks like a very similar church, but they have this cool little conversation. Jules kind of says something which truly exemplifies the type of woman she is, injustice. She says that, hey, even though there is conflict, I bet that people who are in this country are just doing the same thing that I'm doing, the same thing that you're doing right now. And that's just trying to protect people that they love and care about. And that's truly exemplifies what Jules' mindset or ideology is throughout the series. Justice is not black and white. Justice is very gray, especially absolute justice, trying to achieve this grandiose goal of helping out everybody and trying to ensure that overall the greater good is always, pushed forward. It's never easy to attain. There's always dark things you have to do in order to attain it, such as fighting wars, such as, Jules working behind the back of the people within the Union, withholding information from them and shit. And it really just is a cool little instance of Jules kind of expanding more upon her personality. But that large statue that I was mentioning, Jules pushes it out of the way, and right under it is that artifact Remember, the key to Jules going forward to the next loop. However, as soon as Jules gets her hands on it, Victor, death slices, cutting off that long hair that Jules had and getting her down to that little boy kind of bob haircut. And Jules has an absolute look of bewilderment on her face, not understanding why Victor is doing this, but it kind of comes down to, as I mentioned earlier, although they were still trying to attain the same goal of obtaining that card, Remember, they diverged paths at that point. Neither of them were trying to do the same thing in terms of moving forward to this next loop. Like I'd said, Victor had a different goal. Victor tells Jules, "You're my beacon of hope. In this never-ending current of time, no matter how many times I've been on the brink of losing my mind, knowing that I would be able to see you again was enough to keep me holding on. I couldn't care less about the fact that I'm unable to die. So you just please stop suffering for my state. Quit starting over. Remember is just going to give you hope." And as Victor continues to explain that this is a false sense of hope, which Jules is going to attain. Yeah, you're going to have allies. Yeah, you're going to have a head start in this next loop, but it's impossible. You haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't experienced what I've experienced. You don't know that this is just impossible to do. But Jules doesn't care. It's kind of interesting right here because this is what I was mentioning earlier. It seemed like they'd really always moved in tandem. However, this divergence of paths changed or skewed Victor's sense of justice. Since Victor no longer held the same vision of justice as Jules, Jules could finally use injustice on this individual. Jules does that, kind of restricts Victor, and uses that artifact Remember to reset Victor's memories. And as Victor transforms into the white-haired undead, Andy Donné, Jules actually cries out, and she says that, "I know we're gonna find that individual, that final, semblance of hope, that beacon of hope that you need." And as you see that, you see Fuko in that current loop, looking off into the sky, just kind of part of that same moment which Jules and Victor were, they are fully destined to meet each other. They're fated to come across each other, whether it's in that loop or in the next loop. That is going to happen. And this was so good, dog. Just another amazing chapter. Yoshifumi really tied a lot of knots together on this one. Obviously, we get to understand what this artifact Remember is. However, just seeing what fully drove Jules and Victor to the brink, because like I've been saying, Jules and Victor are this parallel to Andy and Fuko. Obviously, Fuko being the new beacon of hope, just like Jules primarily was to do all this, to start all this. She's the one who created the Union. She's the one who began this grandiose task of, hey, let's go defeat God. And she's the one who paired up with the person who can only do it, Andy, the undead, Victor, the undead, and ensured that they're fighting alongside the Union and making sure that we can try to accomplish this task. But Jules had ran out of gas at some point. She had gotten to a point where both her and her partner, Victor, could no longer still cooperate in trying to do this. Victor had been driven to madness, basically. Obviously, he said that Jules kept him sane, but it got to a point where he couldn't see the suffering anymore. He couldn't see the pain. He lost sight of his actual goal in the grand scheme of things. But Andy hasn't, because all of those memories had actually been reset, He didn't need all those sad memories, the greetings, the goodbyes. They didn't need those anymore. Now he's a much more grounded individual instead of this jaded individual that we had beforehand. And we have a new beacon of hope in Fuko. And I hope that we can fully accomplish this task, dude. It's going to be interesting to see what they pick next chapter, because obviously it's going to have to be a choice which is made next chapter. Jules had mentioned that the Union HQ is not holding up anymore, that with all this shaking, even with Unbreakable, that big barrier above them, that the Union HQ is coming down, and it's coming down very soon. And I'm hard pressed. I think it would make a lot of sense, obviously, for them to right that wrong that Jules had. Jules had to, out of nowhere, use the artifact to reset, whenever in reality she should have used the artifact to continue. But does continuing fully help them out? Because continuing means that you can't get Rip on the squad. Continuing means that, we will just have Jules leading over things again, and I don't know if we need Jules leading over things again. She didn't get the job done. I honestly think that Billy could be a better leader for us, solely for the fact that dude's about destruction and about getting it done. They have to continue. They have to continue, because if they don't continue, they'll have a bunch of obstacles in the way and just things that are going to screw them over in terms of actually trying to continue this fight against God. But I really wonder what that means, though, to continue. Is it fully every piece of information? Are they going to know every single thing that's going to happen in the future? Or is it just an understanding of what occurred in that past loop? Is it only affecting negators? I need to do some research on that, but I wonder if that only affects negators. Don't know if artifacts affect humans as well, but dude, an amazing chapter. I'm rambling. That's how you know Yoshifumi got the brain moving, and this was dope. This was freaking dope. More Undead to come. Like I said, hey, if you want that negator video, you better push a brother for it, because it's not coming until y'all deserve it. Shit, but drop a comment, a like, a sub if you're still here. Hasta luego, mi amigos.